Hello, curious minds. Welcome to this intellectual journey. It's often said that at the dawn of the modern age, one man laid the egg that Luther later hatched. That man was a priest who never wanted to live in a monastery, a fierce critic of the church who never left it. I'm talking, of course, about Desiderius Erasmus of Rotterdam. He was Europe's first intellectual celebrity, a man whose letters were read by kings and popes. But his story is also the tragedy of moderation in a world hurtling towards fanaticism and religious war. Before we begin, a brief note. To bring this narrative to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and atmosphere of what we're telling, not as literal historical documents. I sincerely hope you enjoy it and that these illustrations help your imagination soar with me. Our goal is to immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of the 16th century, a time of ink, printing presses, candles, and theological debates that changed the face of the earth. To understand Erasmus, we must understand the world he was born into. It was the second half of the 15th century. Europe was emerging from the Middle Ages, but the shadows of dogmatism were still long. The Catholic Church dominated not only faith, but also politics and knowledge itself. Erasmus was born in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands, around the year 1466. And here we find the first crack in his life. He was an illegitimate child. His father was a priest, and his mother was the daughter of a physician. This illegitimacy would mark his ecclesiastical career. He was orphaned very young due to the plague. His guardians, looking to get rid of the burden, sent him to an Augustinian monastery. But Erasmus was not made for monastic life. He hated fish, fasting, and above all, the mental rigidity of his fellow monks. However, the monastery had something he loved, a library. There he devoured the Latin classics. While others prayed mechanically, he conversed with Cicero and Virgil. He discovered that there was an ancient wisdom that the scholastic theology of his time had forgotten. Scholasticism was the dominant philosophical system. It focused on endless and often sterile logical debates about abstract definitions. Erasmus felt this had alienated Christianity from its original source, the simple and ethical teachings of Jesus. He managed to escape the monastery by becoming a bishop's secretary and then traveled to Paris to study theology. But the Sorbonne seemed stale to him. He wanted something new. He wanted to be a humanist, but what exactly did it mean to be a humanist back then? Humanism was not atheism. On the contrary, it was a movement that sought to revive human dignity through the study of classical Greek and Roman literature. Humanists believed that by studying the ancients, one could become better human beings and better Christians. Erasmus adopted a motto, ad fontes, which means to the sources. Don't settle for what medieval commentators say. Go to the original text. If you want to understand Aristotle, read him in Greek. If you want to understand Jesus, read the Gospels in their original language. This brings us to one of his titanic works. Erasmus realized that the Bible used by the Church, the Latin Vulgate, had translation errors. For over 1,000 years, theology had been based on words that perhaps St. Jerome had mistranslated. He learned Greek, something rare at the time, and dedicated himself to compiling and translating the New Testament directly from the oldest Greek manuscripts he could find. It was an immense detective and philological effort that challenged established authority. He published his New Testament in 1516. He placed the Greek text in one column and his new Latin translation in the other. It was an intellectual atomic bomb. By correcting the words of the Bible, he was correcting the very foundation of ecclesiastical dogmas. For example, where the Vulgate said do penance, the original Greek said metanoeit, which means change your mind or repent. The difference is abysmal. One is an external rite, the other is an internal transformation of the heart. This approach is what we call the philosophy of Christ. For Erasmus, Christianity was not about ceremonies, relics, fasting, or papal bulls. It was about imitating the life of Christ, an interior, sincere, and ethical piety accessible to everyone, not just monks. Erasmus believed in education. He thought ignorance was the mother of evil. If people could read and understand the scriptures for themselves, society would improve. He was a pedagogical optimist. He believed in the power of the word over the sword. But Erasmus was not just a serious scholar. He had a sharp and dangerous sense of humor. During a trip to England where he became great friends with Thomas More, he wrote his most famous work, a satire that would immortalize him, In Praise of Folly. Published in 1511, this little book is a stroke of genius. In it, Folly, personified as a female jester, takes the stage before an audience and delivers a speech praising herself. She claims to be the force that moves the world. Folly says that without her, there would be no marriages, no governments, no friendships. Because to tolerate the flaws of others, one needs a bit of folly, a bit of self-deception. It's a brilliant psychological observation on human nature, but then the tone changes. Folly begins to point out her most loyal devotees, greedy merchants, warmongering kings, and above all, corrupt theologians and clergy. Erasmus uses Folly's voice to speak truths that no one else dared to utter. He mocks monks who believe they'll go to heaven just for wearing a habit or for counting how many psalms they recite, even if they don't understand a single word. He laughs at popes who wage war, forgetting that their master preached peace. The criticism is devastating. The book was an instant bestseller across Europe. Everyone laughed with Erasmus. But beneath the laughter, he was undermining the moral authority of the continent's most powerful institution. He was preparing the ground for a revolution he didn't seek. And here's where the tragedy begins. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses in Wittenberg. At first, Erasmus viewed Luther with sympathy. It seemed Luther was saying what Erasmus had only hinted at. Luther attacked the sale of indulgences, corruption, and empty ritualism. Erasmus wrote him private letters encouraging him, urging prudence, but supporting his criticism. The world expected the great humanist to join the Lutheran Reformation. But as Luther became more radicalized, Erasmus distanced himself. Luther was fire, passion, and absolute certainty. Erasmus was water, nuance, and reasonable doubt. Luther wanted to destroy the structure to save the faith. Erasmus wanted to reform it from within without breaking unity. The pressure on Erasmus was immense. Catholics accused him of being the intellectual author of heresy. They said Erasmus laid the egg and Luther hatched it. Lutherans, for their part, called him a coward for not openly joining the cause. Finally, the clash was inevitable. And it wasn't about politics, but about the very essence of human being. In 1524, Erasmus published De Libero Arbitrio, a defense of human free will against Lutheran theology. Luther believed that human beings were so corrupted by original sin that they could do nothing good on their own. Only God's grace could save them. Human will was enslaved. Erasmus, as a humanist, could not accept such a pessimistic view. Erasmus argued that although grace is essential, human beings must have the capacity to accept or reject that grace. If we don't have freedom, how can God judge us? Where does moral responsibility lie? It was a defense of human dignity. Luther responded with brutal fury in his book De Servo Arbitrio, or The Enslaved Will. He called Erasmus an atheist, a hypocrite, and a dreamer. The break was total. Erasmus was caught in a no-man's land, hated by radicals on both sides. Imagine the loneliness of this man. He saw how his beloved letters, which should have brought peace and wisdom, were used as weapons in a theological war. Europe was bleeding out in religious conflicts, and his dream of a peaceful and united Christendom was crumbling. Despite everything, Erasmus never stopped writing. He moved to Basel, a Swiss city that was a refuge for printing presses and free thought. There he continued his titanic work. He wrote the Adages, a collection of thousands of Greek and Latin proverbs. Expressions we use today like to have one foot in the grave or prevention is better than cure were popularized by him in this book. He wanted to make ancient wisdom accessible to ordinary people. He wanted to democratize knowledge. He also wrote extensively on education and politics. In his work, Education of a Christian Prince, he advised the young Charles V. He told him that a good prince is not one who conquers more lands, but one who best serves his people and avoids war at all costs. Erasmus's pacifism is moving. In an era where popes led armies, he wrote Querela Pacis, or The Complaint of Peace. In this text, personified peace complains that she finds no refuge anywhere, neither in courts nor in monasteries. He said, "War is sweet to those who have not tried it." Erasmus knew that war destroys not only bodies, but the very morality of society. He was one of the first modern intellectuals to propose international arbitration to resolve conflicts. His last years were bitter and painful, physically due to gout and kidney stones, and spiritually from seeing the division of Europe. He died in Basel in 1536. His last words, according to legend, were in Dutch, "Leave God" or "Dear God." He died without receiving the last sacraments of the Catholic Church, but also not as a Protestant. He died as he lived, as an independent Christian, trusting only in Christ and not in human rights. He was buried in Basel Cathedral, which was already Protestant. So what is his legacy today? Erasmus was the father of the modern critical spirit. He taught us that doubt is not a sin, but a tool. He taught us to distrust fanaticisms, no matter where they come from, and to seek truth in original sources. His vision of a Europe united by culture and education lives on today in the student exchange program that bears his name, the Erasmus program. Millions of young people have crossed borders thanks to the seed he planted. In a world that often seems to be polarizing again, where nuances are lost and shouting replaces argument, Erasmus's voice is more necessary than ever. It reminds us that tolerance is not weakness, but the highest expression of intelligence. He invites us to laugh at our own folly, to question authority with elegance, and to remember that above nations and dogmas, we share a common humanity. Erasmus was, in the noblest sense, a citizen of the world. Erasmus's Christian humanism did not politically triumph in his century. The swords of Catholics and Protestants drowned out his voice. But his victory was long-term. The Enlightenment, religious tolerance, and human rights owe him a debt. So the next time you hear someone defend an idea with blind fury, remember Erasmus. Remember his ironic smile, his love for books, and his unwavering faith in the human capacity to improve through education. Now let's delve a bit deeper into his methodology because that's where his technical genius lies. Erasmus didn't just read, he compared. By placing manuscripts side by side, he invented modern textual criticism. Imagine the courage it took to tell the church, this word you've used for centuries is incorrect. It wasn't arrogance, it was intellectual honesty. For Erasmus, sacred truth could not depend on a translation error. His relationship with the printing press was symbiotic. Erasmus was the first author who understood the power of media. He worked hand in hand with printers, correcting proofs while the ink was still fresh. He was a compulsive editor. It's said that he wrote so fast that printers could barely keep up. His colloquies, textbooks for teaching Latin, became bestsellers because they weren't boring grammar, but lively dialogues about daily life, love, and religion. In these colloquies, he taught students to think critically while learning Latin. He slipped criticisms of superstition between grammar lessons. It was an educational Trojan horse. He infiltrated humanism into schools across Europe. It's fascinating to think about his network of correspondence. He wrote letters to Poland, Spain, Italy, and England. Without the internet or telephones, Erasmus wove a social network of intellectuals, the Republic of Letters. He was the central hub. This network gave him unique protection. Attacking Erasmus was attacking the man most respected by monarchs. Even when his books were banned by the Inquisition years later, his influence was already unstoppable. But let's return to Folly. Why did he choose that vehicle? Because satire allows one to say things that, if said seriously, would lead you to the stake. Humor was his shield and his sword. By making people laugh, he disarmed his opponents. However, there's a melancholy in Erasmus. He saw his ideals trampled. He saw friends like Thomas More executed for not yielding to King Henry VIII. He saw how tolerance became a crime on both sides. His intermediate position, his middle way, was seen as weakness. But today we know that remaining moderate when everyone else becomes extremist requires more courage than being swept away by the current. Erasmus was a hero of sanity. Many wonder what would have happened if the church had listened to Erasmus before Luther. Could we have had a Reformation without schism, without religious wars? It's one of history's great counterfactual questions. Perhaps it was impossible. The corruption was too deep and the political tensions too strong. But Erasmus left us the blueprint for what might have been. He left us the idea that faith and reason can walk hand in hand. His influence in Spain was enormous, though brief. Erasmianism took strong root at the University of Alcalá de Henares and among intellectuals like Juan Luis Vives. It's even said that Don Quixote has an Erasmian spirit in its critique of folly and reality. But the Counter-Reformation closed that door. Spain and Southern Europe shut themselves off from his ideas, associating them with Protestantism. Erasmus went from being the most widely read author to being on the index of forbidden books. Fear overcame curiosity. Even so, his spirit survived in the shadows. Montaigne, Shakespeare, and Cervantes drank from his humanism. The idea that human beings are complex, fallible, and worthy of compassion is an Erasmian legacy that permeated Western literature. Erasmus warned us about the dangers of confusing religion with nationalism. In his time, being French or German began to weigh more than being Christian. He fought against that tribalism, advocating for a universal Christendom. Today, as we see the resurgence of exclusionary nationalisms, his message resonates strongly. Erasmus would tell us that our borders are imaginary lines, but our humanity is a tangible and sacred reality. He was also a pioneer in defending women. Although a man of his time, in his colloquies, he presents cultured women who debate and win arguments against ignorant abbots. He believed that women should receive a liberal education just like men. His theological legacy is subtle. He didn't found a church. There are no Erasmians as there are Lutherans or Calvinists. His church is that of free spirits, of those who seek God in truth and not in the tribe. Let's reflect for a moment on his working method. Erasmus corrected his own works again and again. The adages began as 800 and ended up being more than 4,000. For him, knowledge was never a finished product, but a living process. This intellectual humility is rare. To admit that one can improve, that one can have erred, is the mark of a true sage. In a world of gurus selling absolute certainties, Erasmus offers us the nobility of constant correction. And let's not forget his Latin. Erasmus revived Latin, cleaned it of medieval dust, and transformed it into a flexible, elegant, and living language. He was the last great writer in Latin, the universal language of European culture before the rise of vernacular languages. He's sometimes accused of being elitist, of writing only for the learned. It's true that he wrote in Latin, but his ultimate goal was for those ideas to permeate downwards. He wanted the farmer to sing psalms while plowing, understanding what he was saying. His life is a reminder that the pen can be mightier than the sword, but also that the pen needs courage. Erasmus was not a martyr of blood, but a martyr of reputation, attacked by all for defending the truth. In his final days, watching the city of Basel destroy religious images in an iconoclastic frenzy, Erasmus felt like a stranger in his own world. The beauty he loved was being destroyed in the name of theological purity. But he didn't let bitterness consume him. He continued working until the very end. His work ethic is inspiring. Sick, in pain, surrounded by enemies, he kept translating, kept writing, kept lighting candles in the darkness. Erasmus teaches us that culture is fragile, that civilization is a thin veneer that can break if not nurtured with education and tolerance. He is a guardian of the humanist flame that we must protect. Looking back at that turbulent 16th century, the figure of Erasmus rises not as a giant of strength, but as a giant of conscience. He was the conscience of Europe, a conscience that was ignored but could never be silenced. His friendship with Thomas More is one of the most beautiful chapters in intellectual history. Two brilliant minds who loved and respected each other, though their destinies were tragically different. More died for his principles. Erasmus lived for his. One chose martyrdom, the other survival to keep writing. Who was more right? Perhaps both. The world needs martyrs, but it also needs teachers who live to educate the next generation. If Erasmus were alive today, he would surely be an active social media user, but he would use humor to diffuse hatred. He would be the tweeter who makes you think before you insult. He would be the blogger who seeks nuance in sensationalist news. So what do we take away from this journey? We take away the importance of returning to the sources. Don't settle for the headline, read the news. Don't settle for prejudice, get to know the person. That's the Erasmian spirit applied to the 21st century. We also take away the need to laugh at ourselves. The fanatic never has a sense of humor. Laughter is the antidote to totalitarianism. As he said in Praise of Folly, life is a comedy where everyone plays their part. And finally, we take away hope. The hope that reason and goodness, though sometimes appearing defeated, have a stubborn resilience. Erasmus's ideas took centuries to flourish, but they did. Erasmus of Rotterdam, the illegitimate son, the renegade monk, the prince of humanists. A man who didn't change borders, but changed minds. And in the end, changing a mind is more difficult and more important than conquering a kingdom. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life and work of this intellectual giant. It has been a pleasure to share the light of his thought with you amidst the shadows of history. If this video has made you reflect, if you felt that spark of curiosity, then the spirit of Erasmus lives on in you. Don't let it fade. Keep reading, keep questioning, keep learning. If you've enjoyed this in-depth analysis, please subscribe to the channel and give it a like. It helps us a lot to continue bringing quality, rigorous, and engaging content like this. And tell me in the comments, do you think our era needs more Erasmian folly or more Lutheran certainty? I'll read your thoughts carefully. Until next time, restless minds,